Ladies and gentlemen, welcome in. I'm Robbie.
I'm Jason.
And welcome to the table. We are so excited to have you guys here today. It is the week of August 5th, first full week in August, bringing you an episode. Jason, we had this dream of episodes like our 10th episodes being lists, our 5s being interviews.
Yep.
We're going a little off the rails here because obviously when you do interviews, you got to have someone to interview, you know?
Yep. This is true. And we had a plan in place and it didn't quite go the way we wanted to, but it was all good, not in a bad way. And we had pivoted hard, and I am very excited about next week's. It'll be hard for me not to talk about it. 'Cause our interview next week will be in the game industry. He's a family friend, though we've only met in person twice. We're active on social media. So we will have, I say next week, because to peek behind the curtain, this episode drops this week. This is Tuesday. This episode drops Thursday. But to help prep Robbie, so we're not recording an episode during Worlds, another spoiler, Robbie will be up here starting next week, the week before Disc Golf Worlds, the World's Disc Golf Championship here in Lynchburg. We're recording next Tuesday, all right, Monday. We got it set for next week. So we're going to go and record our interview next week. So we'll be a week ahead so that the week of Worlds, we have an episode ready to go. So, but it'll be good. Like while I was working on the show notes for today, I was already thinking about sending our interviewee something later this week. So he just has some time to think about it. It'll be good.
Yeah. So really, really excited for it. One of the perks of traveling, and one of the biggest reasons that I know we've talked about, oh, hey, what if we do an episode every other week? And to me, I think part of why we do an episode every other week is for convenience of our scheduling. That way it's not like, oh, we got to do this. And then also, I mean, if we were trying to talk about a game every week and we were filming every week, I feel like if you add in us wanting to play the game before we actually talk about it, we're like, all right, Jason, we film on Tuesday nights, so we're not playing on Tuesday nights. You got, in the next 6 days, you better find a place to play some games.
Yeah.
So it would be a little tight, but really excited. Yeah, next week's guest is going to be awesome. And if there are guests that you guys would love to see come on the podcast, let us know, because we will have 10 weeks, basically 2 months to sort of line up and try to get that guest lined up. And it doesn't even have to be realistically, Jason, I don't know how you feel about this. It would be weird, but very doable. If we went to line up a guest and it was oh yeah, no, they're available next month, but they wouldn't be available closer to time, we just shoot it. And we hold on to it. So
I mean, I totally agree with that idea, because we're going to be playing some games while you're up here. We may be able to play with some disc golf pros, and then if we can maybe line up an interview with them, maybe not when they're here, but when they have another break, we're willing to. I agree, we're willing to record whenever, even if we got to shelve it for about a month, so that we can interview the folks we'd like to talk to and like to let y'all hear from as well. Absolutely. But Jason, we've been playing some games already. So what games have you been playing lately? I've been playing a ton. Actually, the last time we talked, I had not got a lot to the table, but a lot on BGA. BGA is still going crazy. I have 21 games going on right now. One with you that eventually will finish, but you actually have to take your turn, Robbie. Yeah. Everybody publicly shame Robbie to get his BGA turns done. Swanky Reed and I just finished our Wingspan game today. It's been going for a few weeks. I actually look at the results. I think he won. I said this last time, if you want to play, if you hit me, I am Browncoat24, or just hit me up on Bards of the Board DM on Instagram. I will friend you and we'll play anything I know how to play. Funny enough, I was playing Parks. I'm not talking about Parks this game, but one of our listeners wanted to play Parks. He's like, sure. I was like, I don't really remember how to play Parks. And so he shot me a message, because I said that last episode. He apologized. I was like, it's all good, because a local friend wants to play Parks. And so it took me a while and probably got smoked, but it was okay. Sometimes I play just to have fun. And another local guy I'm playing another game with, I'm just literally going through the motions. But I am in the top 200 in the world in Castles of Burgundy online, and top 150 in Kingdom Builder. I'm 45,000th in the world on BGA overall. But then the leading person has 2 million experience points. It's crazy. BGA is a fun world that I love. So again, if you guys want to play games on BGA, I will definitely do it. Async, as in we're just taking turns, 1 or 2 turns a day. Eventually we can set up a game night, totally for that. But let me jump back to on the table games. Both of my games I'm going to talk about were actually on the Shelf of Shame. They're not up here anymore. For those who watch us on YouTube, you'll notice that last week and this week I'm in a different room. We are converting the downstairs basement into an Airbnb. So we've moved all the games out from downstairs. The game table is still there, but the background would have been an empty closet, which would have looked weird for the handful of YouTube viewers we have. So I moved it up here, so it's still a little more scenic. But 2 games are missing from my Shelf of Shame. The first one we'll talk about is one you referenced last week, and even Ryan hit me up on that. It's called Dead by Daylight. Dead by Daylight is based on a video game that I've never played, and Robbie got viciously attacked by one person. We heard this story in the last episode. If you haven't, go listen to that episode. But Dead by Daylight is a cooperative game in which essentially one versus many, which I don't play many one versus many games because we don't play many co-op games in our house. A cooperative game is a game where you're all working together to complete the task or win the game. In a one versus many, one person is playing a single character, and the other 4 of us in this particular instance are playing characters trying to survive and take actions. Ryder, my youngest, loves Dead by Daylight, the video game. And so we bought this game a year ago. It's just been sitting on the Shelf of Shame. Because when we watched reviews of it, the reviews were like, it's okay, but you need to play it at its full player count to get the full effect of it. So we had Ryder, me, Elizabeth, and my daughter and her husband, Will, and Hannah and Will. And we played, and Ryder played the killer. And essentially, the gameplay is super easy. You're taking an action. It's everybody privately selects what action they're going to take, and they turn it over. I love those kind of games where you don't have deterministic actions. You're all, okay, I think I'm going to do this. I turn it over and I take this action. You move somewhere, interact with something. Your goal of the game is to activate 3 generators, which once you find the generator, you do a little dice check to get it going, and then find the exit door. You're moving around the board. You can only move one space on each spot, and you're turning over a card that says, I'm going to go the blue route or the yellow route or the green route. The killer, everybody takes their turn. All 4 of us take a turn. Then the killer in Dead by Daylight take 2 consecutive turns. Same kind of turns, but 2 consecutive turns. And the cool thing about this game is it's co-op, so you can talk to each other, but it's in front of whoever's playing the killer. So you don't want to say, hey, I'm going to go here and because he's literally listening to you as you do that, right? So it brings up a unique aspect of gameplay in that you can't really, you could have somebody try to quarterback it, but not really because it's 4 of you and you're sitting in front of the person who's doing it. And of course, we love my wife. She doesn't listen to this, so I can say whatever I want about her. She doesn't want anybody to even suggest an action for her. If you dare suggest the mere thought of what she could possibly do, you know this, and you don't touch her piece either. If you ever play with Elizabeth, do not touch her stuff. And so we don't play cooperative games because she don't like anybody even suggesting that. So I halfway, because we're all talking, I kind of suggested something early, and she kind of gave me a look. I'm like, I will not suggest anything the rest of the night. And the only time I did, I said, hey, we can do this if we want to, generically, because I could give an action to somebody to save somebody. So, but it is a co-op game. You're moving from space to space, turning over tokens to interact with that thing. Ryder says if you've played the video game, it's relatively thematic. You understand the concept of it. There's a lot more in the video game. And he said he took it light on us. He played a harder monster/killer at the beginning, which is harder to control and get the stuff done. And so it wasn't bad. It's one that since you've played the game, we definitely are thinking about playing when you come up, Robbie, if you're interested in it.
Yeah. No, I definitely am. There are like a couple things of like, if you get caught by the killer, do they put you on like a hook to hold you?
He has to be able to. So some of the tokens in the rooms, he has to be in a room with a hook to put you on the hook. Now he can grab you and start carrying you, but you have to have an active hook, a token that's turned over, meaning you found the hook. So yeah. And then each turn, as soon as you get put on the hook, he wins if 8 of these specific tokens get put out. If you get put on a hook the first time a token goes out, and every turn you start on a hook, another one of those tokens goes out. So if you get on a hook, you got to move fast to get somebody off a hook. But yeah, you get put on a hook.
Okay. Yeah. I would be really curious to see, because I don't have a ton of hours by any means in the actual Dead by Daylight, but the gameplay of Dead by Daylight is honestly super simple. It's exactly what you're saying. Like it's interesting that they took the board game mechanic. The nuances of the video game are like the timing of it all, and also you're basically kind of playing like elaborate tag.
Yep.
So in the video game, you're like literally looking at the killer and like walking around boxes and just chancing they're going to go one way or the other. Does the killer move? Yeah, I know they get 2 turns. And you said you only move 1 space. Does the killer move multiple spaces? Like, do they have faster movement, or is it just they get 2 turns back?
They may. Different killers could do different things. Different killers can do. You also get blood points to give you. You all have kind of some basic asymmetric abilities, so you can use blood points to take a turn again to boost. Like one of the way we were able to do it, Will's character could. If something happened in a turn, if someone was injured, then at the end of that turn, he could do some sort of surge where he got to take an extra action. So it is a game. It'll never be a featured game on Bards, but it is the gameplay super easy. Turn over card, move there, interact. The deeper strategy is a lot because you're working with 3 other people to complete a task that someone's seeing you do, right? So when you have 4 gamers, and that's what Ryder realized, he's a very good gamer, but he went light on 4 gamers who know how to play. Because even though Will doesn't have a lot of board game experience, he has D&D problem solving experience and tons of video game experience. All that translates in the right time to problem solving. Cooperative problem solving is what RPGers do all the time anyway. You know this. I know it from listening to them. I realized very quickly they loved the idea of us working together. My lovely wife does not, and I'm okay with it at this point in my life, right? So maybe she should be the killer when we play with you, because Ryder wants to be a character, so maybe that's the difference, and that's actually a good idea. She could be the killer, so no one can tell her what to do, and she can just do what she wants and chase us around the board. The one slight difference, and this is a minor one, if you play the game, actually the biggest difference is in the game, the killer just doesn't know where everybody's at, right? He's tracking one person at a time, whereas in the board game, the killer sees where everybody's at. So he can be a little more specific. Doesn't matter that much because there's 4 of us moving around. So we will definitely, when I mentioned after we played it, I was like, actually, the reviews have been so-so. I'm like, it's not a bad game. Like the actions are easy to play. If you like cooperative games, it's actually a very fun cooperative game for sure. The second game we played was a game I've owned 2 different times and sold because it's never got to the board. It's an all-time classic, top 50 in BGG. It's called Blood Rage by Eric Lang. Blood Rage is any of the hardcore gamers who listen to us have at least heard of this and maybe played it and maybe own it. It just took me a while to get it. There's no specific reason. It finally gets table. There's no specific reason, but it's based in the Viking lore. You are Vikings who are pillaging. The cool thing about Blood Rage, it has a draft. It's a 3-round game. At the beginning of each round, you draft cards that are going to let you take actions. It's also an action selection, and that you're using rage, which is your currency, to take actions. Some actions cost you 1 rage. Some actions cost you no rage. And so you're basically using your rage as a currency. Okay, I must spend 1 rage to invade here. I must spend 1 rage to march over here. And then you also can bring monsters on the board. Like I brought Valkyrie on the board. We brought ice monsters on the board. And then you're pillaging these different areas. And in the pillage, if you're already in that, if you're adjacent, you can choose to join the pillage. Or if you're already in there, you have to pillage. And if you pillage, you have to reveal a card that could possibly be a combat booster card as well. So it has drafting, it has action selection, has a hidden goal, because part of the card you draft can be quest each turn. So you have these private goals you reveal each turn. And then at the end of the round, you reset your rage and you go again. And it was a 3-player game, and most people we looked at said Blood Rage plays better at more. So 3's not bad, but 4's even better. They have a 5-player expansion for it. But it was one that I destroyed Elizabeth and Ryder both times, like smacked them amazingly. Like it was crazy. And I didn't think I was going to do that. And so Ryder didn't have a good time, but he realized it's a good game. But if twice you get to do a lot of stuff and realize, oh wow, I didn't get a lot of points. It just didn't happen. And we even sat and talked after last night's game because we played it twice. Like, Ryder's like, what did I do wrong? I was like, I don't really know. I won a really big, he went all in on one specific fight. And so what happens is if you pillage and you go all in, whoever wins, the loser, every one of their figures goes off the board. And now you have less figures. You got to take actions to get figures on the board to go pillaging again. And so at 2 different times, I beat him with really big, lucky sort of kind of combat things. And so they both were like, I don't like the game at all. I was like, okay, well, I'll sell it after Robbie comes. I actually said, we'll play with Robbie. If Robbie likes it, if Robbie really likes it, he's going to go away with this game as a present for his trip because Elizabeth, because they got beat so bad. And again, if you even as gamers, especially those two, I'm at a place in my life where I get beat bad, but if I have a fun playing, I'm gonna be okay with that. 10 years ago, Jason would not be that guy. If I got smoked twice, I wouldn't want to keep the game. So it's drafting, area control, a little combat, action selection, private goals. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's definitely one that has been, because it's Vikings, right? Like,
yep, it's Vikings.
Somewhat Vikings.
You go to Valhalla. Ragnarok happens at the end of each round. You can bring in Thor. You can bring in Odin's son.
Yeah, so already a theme that I'm like unashamedly a fan of. You add that or a Japanese theme, and the game has to be inherently bad for me to not be like, okay, I'm vibing right off the bat. But I totally get that, and even Ryder's confusion. I'm happy to hear. Like, I'm not happy to hear that he is upset, but we've had that experience before, right? Like the first game we played at Patchwork, we walked out and I got obliterated, and we were both like, huh? How did that happen? Okay. So I am here for the, let's figure out what happened, what didn't. No, I'm very excited to play. And what I'm excited for is the fact that we're going to be there I'll be there for 2 weeks. So we're going to get we get the chance to really dive into quite a few games, which will be fun. Played 2 games myself. One of them is Villainous, which we've talked about before. But part of why Villainous got brought up is because Lindsay actually suggested playing Villainous. So very rarely does Lindsay approach me with a, hey, I'd really like to play this game. And I was like, babe, what inspired this? And Gen Con, I was unaware, did a tournament. Like a Villainous tournament. Not sure. Did you hear about this, Jason?
No, I know they do a bunch of stuff, but I didn't follow it close enough to know they did that.
Yeah, so they did a tournament, and essentially, from how Lindsay explained it to me, is you went into the rounds, and there was like a fixed number of characters, and you kind of randomly drew what character you were going to play from the set and things like that. So really, really interesting. And then when they got to the finals, everybody played the new character, King Candy.
Cool. Interesting.
So that sounds like a fascinating game of Villainous to me, of all of us playing the same character. Because we all know, if you've played a lot of Villainous, the idea is you're playing a specific villain and you're trying to accomplish that villain's goal. Very single player solitaire-esque, because you have your own board. Each villain plays their own way. Some of the villains are super complicated. Some of the villains are very straightforward. And as you're doing that, there is definitely a power ranking to how many of the villains are like OP versus or overpowered versus like, oh, this is extremely, even amongst the base set. I know if I play Queen of Hearts, that essentially the Fate deck, if I don't get fated twice by like turn 5, it's just over. Like, I know that I will win the game, no matter if everyone turns around and faces me repeatedly. But then you have Ursula on the other side, who is extremely difficult, and I've never seen an Ursula win because her win condition is just so difficult to accomplish. So we played Villainous and enjoyed it. Villainous is always going to be up there for me. I'm a Disney fan, but I'm a Disney fan and I love villains. So already interested, but the depth of learning all the different villains is super, super fascinating. So I know Villainous is a game that you've played before, but even in a 2-player game, we ran into the major issue, which is it just takes so long.
Yep.
It's such a slow game.
I said this before. I've heard a content creator say the game should be better than what it is for the artwork and even for some of the gameplay actions. Like, the actions aren't bad. Like, there's nothing, it all makes sense. It's just, it should be better. And when they kind of re-released it last year with basically the same kind of set, but they didn't really streamline anything. Like, what they need to do is create a Villainous that's streamlined a little bit more, a la Splendor Duel or Seven Wonders Duel. Not necessarily a dual version, but take what's good about it and streamline it. They've done that for Dune. Dune Imperium Uprising is a little more streamlined version of Dune Imperium. Not that Dune Imperium's bad, but they took this stuff and made it better. Wormspan, great example, right? Wingspan's great. Wormspan tweaked it a little bit and Most of the time I choose Wormspan over Wingspan for sure, but Wingspan's still great. But they took what they realized can work better. Not that it works bad, but can be better in a different implementation. Ravensburger, somebody do that for Villainous. I promise you, it'll jump up and you'll increase the sales because obnoxious gamers like myself, well, I already buy it because I collect it, but those who wouldn't buy it would now buy it if it's a better game for a snobby gamer like myself.
Yeah. And then you also end up, when you do that, I feel like you end up with some really cool, everyone can appreciate the game together. So like with Wormspan's introduction, you can get a Wormspan or a Wingspan to the table more often.
Yep.
Our house is going to choose, because we've played our Wormspan and we love it, but I will choose Wingspan over Wormspan. But because I love Wingspan, I'm more inclined to play Wormspan. And because you can, if you like the vibe of one, it carries over to both. And so, yeah, I agree. You would see more Villainous. The other game we played is Raccoon Tycoon, which Jason got me for my birthday, and we had not played it yet. And so we sat down, and I will say that I was super hesitant to play this game with my wife, because the more that I read about the game, it was like, you essentially are going to acquire you're going to become a business tycoon. You're going to acquire villages, railroads, these different things. And at the end of it, whoever has the most points wins. But you are just buying stuff over and over. You're buying and selling the whole time. And we've only played one other game, to my knowledge, that is really that focused. And it's called Harbor. It's a small box game, super fun, but it also has a similar concept of Raccoon Tycoon, where the market is kind of shifting the entire time on the buying and the selling of the goods. So Lindsay played Harbor years ago, hated it. She was like, "This is so boring. I hate that it's just capitalism. I'm out." So, okay, a valid complaint of a game. That's fine. So before we even played it, Jason, I set it all up, went downstairs, got it all set up. And then she came down and she was like, "Okay, are you ready?" Because I had to learn it. And she's like, I said, "Lindsay, I need you to walk into this with an open mind, because I'm not entirely sure that you're going to love this." And she was like, "Okay, sure. So we ended up playing it, and she adored it. She loved the artwork. Is super cute. Yep. Such fun artwork. Instantly, you want to talk about a game that is like, I'd imagine upgraded bits would take it to a whole new level. Those resources, the little tokens, some of them look eerily similar from a distance, like the coal and the steel. Yeah. I understand that they're both triangle-esque. And so the mistake we made is we didn't have them separated. So like they weren't in a giant pile, but it was like 3 resource piles one side, 3 resource piles on the other. And so it just got very difficult to tell what all you had. And there's a lot of resource management, which I thought was super fun. The turns, super straightforward. And we're big gamers, and that I want to see how it plays it too. And this is interesting because, Jason, have you played Raccoon Tycoon at 2?
We have not.
Okay. So when Jason and I were texting about the game afterwards, we talked about the turns are super simple. They go super fast, except auctions notwithstanding. Yeah. Was the words that Jason used. So do you know how auctions work in the 2-player version?
I would assume, no, I don't. But I would assume that if you open an auction, I don't know. I assume that if you open an auction, that if the person passes, you have to pay this set amount on the card or +1 off the card or something.
Yeah. So my understanding was all auctions have to open at the base amount on the card or whatever. Right. But in 2-player, whoever starts the auction, they set a price. That is the only time they get to bid. Oh, interesting. So essentially, you set a price, and then the other person says yay or nay. And if they say yay, they can increase it by $1. They can increase it by whatever. But you basically have to play chess on every auction with, okay, if I want to bid $7 for this, would Lindsay just jump me at $8? Right. Or do I just blow her out of the water and go 15? and make her bid high or something like
That's
that.
definitely a different strategy than playing the regular game. That is for dang sure.
Because in the regular game, you'd want to start low, I imagine, to see how
right. You still have to start
how low you can get out with.
You still have to start, I think, with the, like you said, with the amount that is on the card. But that is interesting.
But we certainly, we overpaid for it. But because of that, the auctions were actually not fast or not slow at all.
Yeah.
Because it was okay. Like I had a thing set up, and so we got to the end, and I tried to sneak my way into so many points because there was 3. Lindsay went second, so there was 3 railroads still there, and she was like, "I'm going to pay $20 for this," and I was sitting on like $120 at the end of the game, and the money is just tiebreakers for listeners, and so she's like, "I'm going to pay $20 for this railroad," and I was like, "All right, cool, I'll pay 21." So I took that railroad from her, and if you try to start the auction and you don't get it, you get to do another turn. And so she was like, "Okay, I'm going to bid $40 for this railroad." And I said, "Perfect. I'll pay 41." They took it from her, and she was like, and I literally won the game by 2. Like that second railroad that she decided to go for that I was able to outbid her on was the game. GG. So wild times, but she really loved it. We will definitely be playing Raccoon Tycoon again. Really phenomenal. I think it's a game that we could eventually bring on here for market control. That aspect of the game was super, super cool.
Yeah.
So
because we don't have anyone. We've not talked about a game anywhere near anything like that because For Sale, even though it hasn't been a premier game, is an auction, a pure auction game, and then Raw will never cover, but we want you to play it. And then Nidavellir could be one because that's a pure auction game as well. But it's the market control and the economy of that could be interesting. Yeah, because I know when I mentioned it as a game I played lately, I was like, absolutely. Once you play it, if you like it, it's one that we could do as a featured game for Bards eventually.
Yeah. So I can definitely see it get up there. But today we are not covering Raccoon Tycoon. We got a lot of games that we played and a lot of great games, but we are talking about Lords of Waterdeep, which is such a fun game already. And I got to play it last time I was up there. And if you are a fan of D&D at all, you've ever done any of the role playing and things like that, this game I think is going to really resonate with you because there are, especially if you haven't just done a bunch of homebrew stuff in homebrew, for those of you who are not D&Ders, is where you kind of like make your own adventure. I know Will and Hannah, they do a lot of homebrew, and they take some like set stuff and kind of spin it into their own homebrew. But yeah, Lords of Waterdeep, phenomenal game. Jason, you want to tell us a little bit about the game?
Yeah, for sure. It was released in 2012. Let me put that down. Designed by Peter Lee and Rodney Thompson. I went to go look if they had designed anything else, and they haven't really. They both worked, unsurprisingly, in the RPG world. I think one or both of them has worked for Wizards of the Coast at one time, who published this game. So they both come from an RPG background and has no other specific designed game that I can find, which is pretty cool to have such a big hit for your main game design. They have some other game designs, but that is their main one. It's 2 to 5 players, and it's listed as playing in 60 to 120 minutes, which I think was pretty accurate. We'll talk about a little bit more, but I think that's pretty accurate. In Lords of Waterdeep, you take on the role of one of the Lords of Waterdeep, who are the secret rulers of the city. Through your agent, you recruit adventurers to go on quests on your behalf, earning rewards and increasing your influence over the city. You expand the city by purchasing new buildings that open up new actions on the board and can hinder or help the other lords by playing intrigue cards to enact your carefully laid plans. During the course of play, you may gain points or resources through completing quests, constructing buildings, playing intrigue cards, or having other players utilize the buildings you have constructed. At the end of the 8 rounds of play, the players accrued the most points wins the game. So that's the high-level description from BGG. At its heart, Lords of Waterdeep, 8-round game, worker placement. You're going to place a worker and take an action at that spot. Some of those spots are just get resources. And when we say resources, they're actually characters. They're like mages. We got the rule books because we always just call it the blue. When we played, it was the orange block or the blue block, but they're technically are, I'll tell you real quick and then I'll keep going. You have clerks and fighters and rogues and wizards. So thematically, which we'll talk about more, you're recruiting these folks, but those are the resources. You can get money. You can buy buildings that open up a new spot, worker placement spot on the board. play an intrigue card, which lets you do stuff. It can be a mean intrigue card. It could be a nice intrigue card, give you free stuff, get other people free stuff, and complete quest. You do that over 8 rounds, and at the end of 8 rounds, whoever has the most points wins the game. It really is that simple. Did I capture it right, Robbie?
I think you did a great job. It is the intricacies of this game. This is definitely one that I think if you are newer into the hobby gaming space, you're going to hear about Lords of Waterdeep. There's going to be a push to play it. And I'm trying to think through the games we've had on. This might be one of the most intimidating to look at that we've had yet, in terms of like, you sit down to the table, and we'll get to set up and teach here in a second. But like, if you sat down to play this, I think compared to so many of the games that we've talked about, it could feel like, whoa, because even Small World at the start of it, the board is basically empty outside of the like remains of the ancient people. So it's not like a, oh no, look at all these spaces. Like, it just looks like a map.
Yeah.
Whereas this is clearly not.
Similar to, I'm looking at our list of games we've done, and I agree. Like the closest one I would say, and you kind of hit it without meaning to with what I'm about to say, but is Clank. So Clank is a big board, but it's clearly a map, right? Clank is a map where you're moving down lines that tell you where to go. So it has a bunch of stuff, but you're going to move your way through that, whereas Lords of Waterdeep has just a bunch of spots that you're going to go, move this here and do this, move this here and do this. And even looking back through it, the only real worker placement game we've truly talked about is Stone Age. I'm looking, making sure, yeah. Stone Age is the only true worker placement. And even it's not a pure worker placement, because you're putting a worker and then everybody puts a worker. And then once you're done, you roll die to get stuff. Whereas this is the proper, I put a meeple down, I grab a cube. I put a meeple down, I buy a building. I put a meeple down, I get some money. The purest definition of worker placement.
Yeah. So set up and teach. I have not set this game up, nor have I taught it. So I'll defer to you here in a second, but I will say on the, like, as the preface for it, Jason mentioned that we've only really done Stone Age as a true worker placement. So if you are unfamiliar with worker placement to begin with, which is quite simply, I'm going to have a fixed amount of workers, or essentially each worker translates to an action, I guess you could kind of think about it. That could feel a little intimidating, but because you start with so many workers, it is nice in that, like, you kind of feel like you have some fluff actions to start. And another beautiful part about Lords of Waterdeep is that, to limit that like overwhelming feeling of worker placement, there are so few places to start on the board that I feel like you don't get overwhelmed. But that is coming from my experience. Jason, when you're thinking of setting this game up and teaching it, anything that jumps out to you in terms of, oh, here's what I've got to learn to do?
Okay, yeah, that's, all good points. You're right. It's interesting. When you haven't set up or taught a game, it's interesting how you look at stuff. Interesting is not the right word, right? I go so deep in stuff, and I teach most games and I set up most games. So it's always fun to hear other people's conception of those things when they're not the ones doing it. Anyway, I digress. That for this game, the setup is not complicated, but is a little bit. Because we already kind of referenced it. Everyone was going to get intrigue cards at the beginning, so you're shuffling a stack of intrigue cards. Everyone's going to get 2 quests to start the game. You're shuffling a stack of quest cards. Everyone's going to get Lord. You're shuffling the Lord. You're separating all the meeples. You're separating the money. You're separating these little pieces you do. So I don't mean that to scare anybody away, but it's not just pop, pop, let's go. It takes a little bit of time to set up, but the setup is very easy. There's nothing complicated at all about it. I even have my stuff, especially if you pack it correctly, because a lot of the games, everybody put all their meeples in one bag and all their stuff in other, and then they got split it out. But I, years ago, started putting all my black meeples and all his stuff in one bag, all the yellow meeples and other stuff in another bag, because the game doesn't come that way, and I don't know why it took me so long to get smart like that. That way I can literally just pull out the bag, hand it to the player, and they can pull out what they need for that. So the setup is not hard, but it takes a little bit of time. The teach, and we pretty much already taught most of the game, is very easy. On your turn, so in a 4-player game, you're going to start with 2 meeples to start the game. On your turn, you're going to take your meeple, put it in an open spot, a spot where a worker hasn't gone yet. Take that action. And then next person goes, next person goes, next person goes. On your next turn, you do this exact same action. Take it out, take a meeple, put it, take the action, and go from there. If at the end of my action, I've gathered enough resources to complete a quest, then I can say I'm going to complete a quest. And the quest, for example, one I put up here, just requires an orange cube, 3 black cubes, 4 coins, and it's your fencing goods for the Duke of Darkness, a little skullduggery quest. You get some points, and you get an ongoing benefit on that particular one. Other quests, you just get points and maybe some money, points and maybe some cubes. Actually, what takes longer to teach, even though they're really basic, is the number of worker placement spots. Now, the production of this, which we'll talk about later, is great because the place where you put your meeple, it shows a purple cube. So as long as you understand the concept of, that one purple cube I get from the supply. That one shows 2 black cubes I get from the supply. I go here, it gives me 4 money I get from supply. So talking through each of those spots is very easy because it's right there on the board. There's 2 places that are a little unique. One is when you go get a quest. So at the top of the board, there's always 4 face-up quests, and there's actually 3 worker placement spots there. So that teaches, kind of explain those 3 spots. One, you can get 2 coins and pick a face-up quest. One is to get an entry card and pick a face-up quest. Or one is wipe all 4 and pick one of those new quests that come out. Still pretty black and white. The thing that it's hard to conceptualize is when you go to Waterdeep Harbor. So Waterdeep Harbor is the only place in the base game where you can play an entry card. Like we said earlier, an entry card lets you do something. It could be like you could give somebody a mandatory quest. It says, hey, you cannot complete other big quests till you complete the small quests. Mandatory quests are usually like 3 cubes and you still get points for that. Or you could do a card where it says, hey, choose 2 orange cubes and give somebody an orange cube. So it's a wide variety of entry cards. I like to play cards to do stuff. So if you've listened to me enough, you know I would like to go there. The unique thing about going to Waterdeep Harbor, there's 3 spots. You go there, you play an entry card, and that was your entire turn. Once everyone's taken their normal turns, then in turn order from the Waterdeep Harbor, you get to take an additional turn. So when you go there, you're just playing an entry card, but now you take an additional turn from what's left in the rest of the board. So once you kind of conceptualize, this is a way I can play fun entry cards, get some stuff I need, and accept the fact that these worker placement spots may not be what I want them to be, but I now have an extra action. I always like bonus actions as well. So that is when doing the teach is super simple, except for the Waterdeep Harbor. And then once you realize it after one round, you're like, I totally get it now. Like it's hard to conceptualize. I get to go there, then I get to go again, but it may not be in turn order at that point. Normal play, you go in turn order, but once you go to Waterdeep Harbor, you go in order of who went to that spot. And so it's usually literally one round. We had Dakota and Marissa over on Friday night. I don't think Marissa understood it the first time, but by the second time, she was hitting Waterdeep Harbor pretty regularly because she grokked it at that point.
Yeah. Yeah. You definitely, when you play for the first time, it's kind of one of those, I think I'm going to go here. I might go here. And if you've played a lot, you kind of build a preference. I feel like that's worker placements in general, is if you play a lot of worker placements, you have spots that you're like, I'm going to push that button. I'm going to try to go there. I'm going to try to utilize that strategy unless I'm trying to do something wacky or I'm being pushed out of that space. I think of Stone Age that we played, where it was those quests in the bottom, like Jason's going for those every time. Like if it's available, he's going to go there. And Elizabeth's going to be going for tools for a little bit. And so you balance out accordingly. So it's not surprising. Like for instance, when I was playing, I didn't go I think I quested like twice, maybe 3 times. And those all happened near the end of the game when I was like, I got to get some points and things like that. So it's very fascinating how you choose where you're going to go. But I would agree, like the teach is rather straightforward. You kind of just jump into it is the best way to teach it. Is like, that actions are going to have value. There are a couple like in-game strategies that help influence those actions, but I would always be hesitant to teach trying to recommend those, because I feel like you'd be guiding the gameplay too much.
Yeah, I agree. The one thing we do because we just played with Marissa and Dakota on Friday night, and Dakota's definitely a game delight, and Marissa is definitely over the last year, at least with us, have played a lot of games. So she's no longer beginning gamer or new beginner. She's definitely moving up that midweight gamer. The thing we emphasized was, in the end, you can't forget about quest. So in the end, to oversimplify a game that has a lot of fun stuff, you need to complete quest, because that's where your points are at. Your big points are at. So what's great about that is, to your point, with Lords of Waterdeep, you can just jump right in, because your first 2 moves are not going to tank you for the game, because it takes us all a few rounds to get resources going. You're not going to complete too many quests to start. We're all given randomly 2 quests at the start of the game. So you already have some goals to go after, but not rarely, I'd say over half the quest in there, you won't have enough resources the first round to complete anyway. Some you would for small points, but most of them are 4 or 5 or 6 resources. And so that's going to take you a couple of rounds. So there are some games, and we haven't covered any, but there are definitely some games in the world that if you don't take okay turns your first 2 or 3 turns, you could be behind the rest of the game. Lords of Waterdeep is not that way. Just jump right in first round. Okay, go get some black, get a purple. You're good. Next round, maybe get some money, whatever. Maybe buy a building, right? And then by that 3rd or 4th round, it's like, okay, now I got it. No one's really pulling away, because unless you're all going for the exact same cubes, especially in a 4-player game, it's unlikely. You can do other things. So I like the fact that you kind of just get going with it, and it's not going to hurt you by not really knowing what to do, as long as you're gathering resources. That's the foot stomp, is you got to start getting the resources, but almost every spot on the board gets you resources anyway on principle. So I love that.
Theme, as the theme guy of the podcast, I will say, if you're a D&D lover, the theme is so good. I would say if there's any part where the theme is tough, is in base components. Yeah. Jason mentioned, you go here, you get a purple cube. You go here, you get black cubes, all that. Thematically, those are supposed to be druids and warlocks and wizards and all these different things. That doesn't come across at all.
Yep.
Even as someone who loves the D&D theme, loves a good theme, there were cubes. At no point did I think I'm going to draw in some druids here. It was, all right, I'm going to get some purples, because purples seem like I need some purples. Nobody else generating purple. Awesome. Even Ryder, who I feel like is someone who will use the correct terminology almost as that corrective language to help you get in the theme and all that. When Ryder wasn't leaning into it, that let me know, all right, I'm going to pass. Okay. I get to not take part in that. So I would say the theme in the cards really translates. The actual theming of the game, very loosely held on. Yeah. I will say that the name of the game being Lords of Waterdeep, that actually does kind of guide the game to a good world of, you have a Lord card that you are representing, and that can have, because it's varied scoring goals or variable scoring goals, that could truly influence how you end up playing the game to a certain degree. And I think that is really cool, that we are the Lords of Waterdeep, and based on what lords are at the table, we might all be trying to play the game a bit differently along the way.
Definitely. If you open your mind to it, then you can definitely kind of get into it. But like you said, the cubes, unless you remember that, and I have to pull it out to even remember, a white is a cleric, an orange is a fighter, a black is a rogue, and a purple is a wizard. Some of the actions you take make sense. For example, here's one of the quests you complete, an Arcana quest: recover the Magister's orb. Requires 3 rogues and 2 wizards. Okay, that kind of thematically makes sense. There's one that's, you deliver an ultimatum in warfare, and it's 4 fighters, a rogue, and a wizard. A rogue and a wizard would take their fighters with them if they went to deliver an ultimatum to people, right? So the principle of that is there. And of course, in the world we live in, you can buy an aftermarket upgrade, and I've just never done it. There are actually little bitty meeples, right? That look like rogues, that look like clerics. Now, if you did that, the theme clicks. Even for me, I'm like, I'm going to take my warriors, my soul, where do they go? My fighters, and I'm going to go here and do this because it looks like a little fighter. So obviously that's probably costs as much as the game does because it required that many meeples. And every time I play Lords of Waterdeep, I love it. And I realize, I probably should upgrade this stuff. But, yeah, the theme is, I'm not a D&D guy, but the theme, if you embrace it, cubes notwithstanding, like Robbie said, you kind of relate to those things for sure. Yeah. As for game length, I mean, kind of keeping down our overview of the game. So we'll talk a little bit about gameplay. For game length, I mentioned at the beginning, it says 60 to 120 minutes. I think that's pretty accurate, but don't let that scare you off, right? I'm gonna foot stomp very fast. I don't mind long games. A lot of people don't, but in Lords of Waterdeep, it doesn't feel like it's a long game. Like we played a 4-player game. Nobody of the 4 we played on Friday night, no one is slow, but no one's other than me and Dakota are pretty fast. But Marissa and Elizabeth played like a normal speed, and it was including the teach. It was like an hour and a half for a 4-player game. Now it's 4 gamers or 3 really hardcore gamers, and we're pulling Marissa along to be one of those people. But it just didn't feel like it. It's like I was looking down. I was like, it's already the 5th round. Oh my gosh! It's already like you go because that first round, like I said earlier, you're just taking a couple actions, get some resources, move to the next round. Take some actions, maybe complete a quest. Okay, move to the next round. Next thing you know, you're like, oh, I'm halfway through the game. There's so much stuff I still want to do in the best way possible because I still get to do most of those things. But that, even if it becomes an hour and a half to 2-hour game, if at the 5-player count, it just doesn't feel that way because it just doesn't feel that way to me. I don't know if you remember our gameplay, Robbie, because I think we played it at 4, but how was your feelings on the game length?
You perfectly captured it. And at no point during that game did I reasonably think, oh, this game's taking forever. The last few turns definitely went slower.
Yeah.
But why? Because I mean, you're trying, every true gamer is trying to min-max at that point.
Yeah.
And because it's this carousel of, I'm going to place a worker. Like Ryder's going to place a worker, Elizabeth's going to place a worker, all that. So like poor Ryder, I actively remember we got to the end of that game, and I couldn't even tell you who won that game. I think I did pretty well that game, but I Elizabeth may have beat us all.
I'll go look it up.
But I remember on the last round, I'm pretty sure was going for Ryder. I was every turn after at least the first. And Ryder kept being like, oh, that's what I was going to do. Oh, that's what I was going to do. And like, it just kept happening. And these turns don't really play out like, because you place all your workers and then you do the actions, right? So it was so fascinating of, okay, I have to reset because you have this plan for all the workers that you're going to use. And then suddenly when one doesn't get to go there, you're like, well, I was counting on getting that cube so that I could do this quest that I'm going to go pick up, but now I can't do that. So that went slow, but that I feel like that's where the AP really shines. But that's going to happen in literally every game you play. So I don't even think it's a fair critique,
right? I agree.
Of the game because that's everything.
Yeah, it's one of those that because. Even when I think about the AP people I play with, and I'll come back to, like, I'm going to come back to Blood Rage. Blood Rage is, like, love my wife. Again, she doesn't listen to this podcast. I can say whatever I want. But if Chris Manny listens to it, they may tell her what I said, right? Or Dakota. But she gets into overthinking, and it's not quite AP, but it seems like AP because she's like, what do I want to do this? And in Blood Rage, there's times I want to move here, but it may start a combat. And do I have the cards? What cards they have? What do I want to? So she had some AP last night. And there were times where Ryder and I were just looking at each other. Like, come on, Elizabeth, you're killing us. You're killing us. Even in Lords of Waterdeep, it's rare that you're thinking, should I get the black or should I get the purple? Should I get the black or should I get the purple? Because the board starts shrinking on your, you know what quest you want to do. I need black and purple. I'm going to go get black now. Someone takes the purple spot. Well, is there a building that, okay, there's a building that lets me get a wild. Let me go get that purple. Rarely do you have to pivot hard to do those things. And even for these slower players in Lords of Waterdeep, because there's always something to do, rarely, unless they just are AP in everything in life, it rarely will slow to a grind the way other games I've played with AP prone players can. They're thinking of every single move. There's some games that allow us to do that. I love combos, but the good thing is there are no combos in Lords of Waterdeep, right? So you're not trying to think, I do this and it gets me to do 3 things. I do this, it may let me complete a quest, which may let me do something, but that's a rare thing, right? So you don't get to that point. So you're spot on that AP is rarely a true thing in that. And if it is, it's not noticeable at all because you're kind of looking through their turn will go and the next person goes, the next person goes. So their turn's not going to take 5 minutes. Their turn may take, okay, I may get this resource, lets me complete a quest. That quest may let me do one extra thing. Most of the time it doesn't. 95% of the quests, I just get some points or some money. 5% of them, you may get take an additional action or do something else. So that turn is so quick when they take their turn. Well, go ahead, Robbie.
Oh, I was just going to say, when I think of even a game that we did recently in Flamecraft, I think about the last turn of Flamecraft, or the last round of Flamecraft, and I think of the last round of Lords of Waterdeep. And it doesn't feel like an extreme exaggeration to say that we can do the entire last round of Lords of Waterdeep in about as much time as a really solid turn it takes someone who is like in the middle of the rotation in the last round of Flamecraft, because they have to readjust because everything's constantly shifting.
Yeah.
And from the time that, like a speed chess timer, like it clicks onto them, it might take about the same amount of time for everyone to do their action as it did that one person trying to think through and plan the combos and all that. And that's with AP on both sides. So
I agree. It's a fair analogy for sure. What's funny is I think about this. We're going to kind of pivot a little bit to the strategy in the game, and I'm gonna highlight the scores for you. Then we can talk about strategy and how strategy can be so different and gameplay can be so different, right? So obviously, now that we played Robbie enough, I know he always asks what's the kind of a winning score is. So I just brought that up for Dakota. So in our game, Robbie, since you brought it up, I finished dead last with 93. You finished third with 101. Ryder was 106, and Elizabeth was 115. So yeah, she did pretty much stomp everybody, right? So I told all that to Dakota. Here's the scores in our game. So remember, first place was 115 in our game of 3 people played a lot and you a good gamer. Fourth place in our game was 122. So 7 points higher was the fourth place in the game, right? Third place, and that was Elizabeth. She had the highest score last time on 115. She scored, 122. She's going to do great. No, she actually finished in last place. She scored 7 points higher, but finished in last. Third place was
You can already see my saltiness after that conversation of like, because I get like a 117 and I'm like, oh my gosh, I've got it locked up. And then it's like, nope, you're in fourth. No.
Marissa got 127. I got 131. And Dakota got 137. And I really couldn't tell you and I mean this the best way possible, why we scored more that game. Like the quest came up the right way. The intrigue cards were good. The great buildings. We did have good buildings come out earlier. Not that any buildings are bad, but buildings that let you get wild cubes are really good. And that becomes the economy of those things. So there's so many different levels of strategy to go for. So in 2 different games for 2 of the same players, me and Elizabeth, right? The scores were wildly different. And that's great. That's what makes Lords of Waterdeep such a fun game.
That's, oh my gosh. My last trip, I was up there. My salt was at an all-time high because it really was. I think I lost like 3 games that trip where it was, okay, here are the average scores. If you get into here, you're solid. And I was like, oh, sick. Because I'm pretty sure when we heard this one, it was like, if you score in triple digits, you're feeling good.
Yep.
Like that usually will be fine. And so I was like, all right, snuck into triple. I'm feeling okay. And then, nope, just got blasted. Our Flamecraft game, it was like, here's where you want to get. And it was me and Ryder playing a game of our own, and Ryder was really playing a game of his own. It just felt like that trip, every single time I played well, someone went insane. But I think about the strategy of this, and what really is cool is you really can approach this a multitude of ways. There are a bunch of different ways to attack it. And as the game goes on, the board develops. So there are more opportunities to place more meeples. There are more opportunities to score in different ways. And I love like just looking through when Jason built the show notes, like a couple of questions. Do you focus on entry cards? Do you buy a lot of buildings? Do you focus on your Lord's goals or not? I know I mentioned that, like, I felt like thematically the game really pieces together. We are all these lords and we come together and here are our scoring conditions. But I think it's because in the game that I played, my scoring goal made a lot of sense for my lord. So I went for it. But it totally makes sense that sometimes you're going to play the game and you're going to be like, based on the entry cards I have and the Lord that I have, this is just not going to work with one another. I'm going to have to ignore one of these. So it definitely, I think what makes this really cool is when we played Stone Age for the first time, the other worker placement we talked about here on the show, I remember finishing the game and looking at Jason and Elizabeth and being like, in what world would I ever not do the strategy that Jason's going for?
Yeah.
Like, no matter if the cards seem like you're going to burn through all the cards anyways. So why would I ever not walk down that road? Lords of Waterdeep, because there's so much variance in what order the buildings come out, what the intrigues are, what the quests are, I feel like you have to be able to pivot to consistently play well in this game, because you could go all buildings, but if you get really bad buildings to start, you're in trouble. And also it's really tough to like guarantee that you're going to get all buildings because since first player shifts around. So I, at least as someone who's played obviously significantly less of this game, how do you feel about the pivoting difference between even Stone Age to here, Jason?
Yeah, I agree. Stone Age in general, like we talked about before, when it came out, it was a great game for what it was. So many games have surpassed it, but it lets you chuck some dice and do some things. But in the end, you're getting cards and getting your huts. That's Stone Age. Getting cards, getting huts. Huts cost resources, cards cost resources, depending on which resources you go with dictates how you're going to do it, right? So that is Stone Age. That's the two ways. And you have some other little fun things you can do to modify it as you go. Whereas Lords of Waterdeep, you have, and I didn't really explain it specifically, but like Robbie referenced it. So we're all privately dealt a Lord, and that Lord's going to say, you get 4 points for every Arcana quest and every Skullduggery quest you get. That's a private goal. You know that goal for the game. Or you could be the one Lord that I always like to get is the one where you get 6 points for every building you own. And I don't think I've accurately explained buildings either. So one of the worker placement spots is a place to go buy buildings. There's always 3 face-up buildings to buy, but once someone goes there, that spot has been taken. So they bought a building, they put it out, and we have these little tokens that are in your color that you put it. So for the rest of the game, so say Larissa or say Dakota bought a building that if a worker went there, they got 2 black and a white. Dakota, if anyone else goes there, can now choose a white or black for free. So it's another way of economy. Buildings are awesome for that very reason. But one of the Lords says every building you build is worth 6 points. So if you're the builder, if you're Larissa, whatever her last name is, the character, not Marissa, but it's just comical because Marissa had Larissa. I'll tell you this joke. So when the game started, Marissa even said, hey, so how do you buy buildings? And we're like, oh, we know Marissa's the builder, just kind of joking. And sure enough, she was the builder. But the funny thing is, I made a joke later on thinking I would have bought a building, but someone at this table whose name rhymes with Larissa was buying the buildings, and the character's name is Larissa. It was just funny, right? In the moment, because Marissa and Larissa, like, it was just very funny. As someone whose name rhymes with Larissa, and that was it. But if you're that person, you're going for that. But you don't have to go for that. Yes, that can be big points at the end. That doesn't necessarily have to be the difference, because if you just go heavy with just with quests that go big, because some quests have ongoing abilities. Like here's one. If you did this one early, it's called a plot quest. There are just regular quests that give you points and rewards. There's ones that give you small points but an ongoing ability. The one I referenced earlier, recover the Magister's orb. So for the rest of the game, once you play this quest, once per round, you can, my lights are bad here, you can assign a worker to a space containing an opponent's space. That's awesome. So like for the rest of the game, you now can go to a space that's already been occupied by someone. So do you go for a bunch of those and give yourself additional abilities? Do you go for some of these quests that give you like 20 points and it's just boom, there you go. Here's one that you're turning stuff in, you're impersonating, impersonating an Ardebrant noble, but you get 18 points for it and 2 intrigue cards due later on. I love intrigue cards, but when we played, I just couldn't get any good intrigue cards. So that stunk. So I didn't go to the Waterdeep Harbor and I didn't get a lot of extra turns. Marissa was that same way. She was like, I just can't get intrigue cards, or mine just don't work for me. Because sometimes an intrigue card is, hey, everyone has to remove a black from their player board, and for every black that's removed, you get 2 points. Or if everyone has a black, you can do that, but it's not helping you. It's just taking that away from them. That's okay if they're about to complete a quest, but if it does nothing good for you, It's not that great. Do you buy buildings? Because the economy of creative. If you buy a building now for the rest of the game, when someone goes there, and they're going to go there because the buildings are all good, you just get a free thing. If you go there, you don't get the free thing, but it's a really good building. The pivot is a true thing. I when I started mine, quests could not come up that were within my Arcana and Skullduggery or whatever. So I just started completing quests. That was my goal. You know what? I'm not going to go after my Lord's quest. I'm just going to go after a quest for this game. And I almost pulled it out. Whereas Dakota, I think, completed one more quest than me, and he ended up being about 6 points, but that made it not as close as I wanted it to be. So I like the fact that you may not get entry cards, but that also may mean you're not worried about that Waterdeep Harbor, and you're going and taking those spots everybody else wants. Or if you're the builder, you're going for the building every time and getting that economy that just builds upon itself.
Yeah. And when people use your buildings, you also get rewards for people using your buildings. So it's kind of this like, if for the right person going for buildings, you get points because you built the buildings, but then also if you build the right building, people continue to just help you out. I know when we played, like one of the buildings that I had, it was one of the only buildings that was generating a certain troop type or whatever.
Yeah.
And so because of that, it was like every single turn I was getting something because there was a guarantee that someone's going to use my building to do this. And I remember Ryder, like if he would have got that building, I think he's actually super competitive with Elizabeth. And then me and Jason are just waving from a distance in the game we played.
Yeah.
So the replayability, super high because of everything that we've mentioned here. Like it is definitely a game that I feel like you could, if you have a dedicated game table for sure, but even if you don't have a dedicated game table, you could set this up and play. Like if you're going on a trip, like a family trip for the weekend, you could set this up on a table at the Airbnb, bank, and just play it every night for your vacation, and all of your games would be vastly different. So it is like, I love that factor based on, I saw that Jason got Larissa that game and he went crazy with it, but then suddenly I get Larissa and I'm like, well, I just got to rinse and repeat that strategy.
Yep.
But someone else is just blocking the buildings a little bit more. So I have to pivot. It's not just simply, I get this card, I win, which to me is like a really well-balanced game. Because I think of Scythe, I know that we've mentioned before as playing, and Scythe literally had to have one of the factions banned because when you got this and this together, you just went. Like the whole game was on a timer. So, and Scythe is a more modern game than even Lords of Waterdeep is. So it's just interesting how you see that balance and replayability really shine
for sure
inside of games.
For sure. Yeah, in Scythe, it was a combo specifically. It was a worker, whatever they call it. I forgot. It was the faction and a board that you could go Google this, that if you had that combo, you're like almost guaranteed to win in 13 moves. You could get your because in Scythe you're getting 4 or 5 stars. Because I went and watched a few videos about him when we played Scythe a couple years ago. But like, there's 2 different actually faction player combos that have been permanently banned, and I have the updated rule book where it even specifically says that you can play with those, but just give them to someone who maybe is not a good gamer. If you ever play Scythe and you want to help somebody who's not a good gamer or a new gamer, give them that banned combo and just see, but don't tell them it's banned. See if they can do it. But because of the way it is, it's that way. But like Robbie said in Lords of Waterdeep, that's not the case here. It's one where, and I put this in the show notes, and I even said this the other night when I was looking through BG stats. I'm like, and I say this all too often, but it's like, it's a game that I only have like, I think 5 plays now total in BG stats. And I've been doing BG stats for 4 years. I'm like, but I could play Lords of Waterdeep immediately after I finish it. I like a lot of my games, but not a lot of them do I want to play immediately when the game's over with. But Lords of Waterdeep, I was ready to play immediately again. We weren't going to. It was late at night. They had to take off. But I was ready to go immediately after we played Lords of Waterdeep because I wanted to see what I could do the next time. I wanted to see what intrigue cards I got out. I wanted to see what quests came out. I want to see what Lord I got. Maybe I got the building. Maybe I could get some buildings because I think whether I'm the builder or not, I always get buildings, and I could not get buildings. I got a building at the end of the game, and I really got it for points because what we didn't say, a unique mechanism in it. So I said there are 3 buildings that are out there, and at the beginning of the game, they're all just one victory point is put on top of each one. someone buys one. So now that at the end of that round, a victory point, when we bring out the new, you only replace the building that missed, and now you put out a victory point on each of those buildings. So the 2 buildings that didn't get bought now have 2 victory points on them, and it keeps stacking to that building is bought. I think later in the game, I bought a building for like just really to get 5 victory points because I had some money. The money doesn't translate the same way, so I bought the building for that. And so the fact that I finished second, not doing what I normally like to do because I like economy, I like entry cards, and I like buildings. I love the fact that the replayability is there within that. And I don't ever think, oh man, I played the app a lot as well. There's a great app on iPad. I haven't played it in a long time, but I played a ton, and I could just play it and play it and play it because I like seeing what I could do for those things.
Yeah. And I can't rave about I realize we started with if you think about the theme, there are the little cubes, and it's just like the theme doesn't translate because of the cubes and all that. But I would say, like, truly, I think that like these little wooden cubes you get already take production to a higher scale because they could be little plastic. They could have been plastic bits. They could have been the little cardboard tokens. Yeah. Like I think about this pivot here. If instead of colored cubes, we would have gotten like cardboard swords for fighters, a wizard's hat, a like little cross for the cleric, whatever it may be. I think it makes the game feel super cheesy.
Yeah.
If they would have gone that route rather than the pure wooden.
Yeah.
And what's nice is from the translation standpoint, it's very curious to me that like on the building, it says black or purple cube. And it looks like a black or a purple cube. Obviously, you could have, if you knew you're going to produce a different way, you could do that differently. But I love that I'm looking at that black cube and I go, okay, cool. And I look over at the pool of black cubes and I pick one out.
Yep.
From a gameplay standpoint, the production really does help me play it very clearly. And because it's Wizards of the Coast connections or whatever, like you get some artwork that does actually translate across from actual Waterdeep, which just like if we're going to give credits and kudos to, Villainous because it has actual artwork from Disney, I feel like we have to in the same breath say the artwork does translate over, which is super intriguing, to use a card from the game, right?
I see what you did there.
Intriguing that it carries over. So how do you feel about production?
I agree. The artwork is, and as you said, you referenced it, Wizards of the Coast, who owns D&D, at least D&D, whatever the current variation of D&D is, because they have the artwork, it is great. I will say this, if there's everything you captured was correct. So for the gameplay, purple cube is purple cube, orange cube is orange cube. I was just quickly looking up to see what it even cost to upgrade it. It only cost me $25 if I just wanted to get wooden meeples, but in the same color. So I've seen the one where they're screen printed, but a meeple in that color, one looks like a wizard, one looks like a fighter. I'm like, okay, well that actually could make sense because it's still just an orange piece of wood, but he's a meeple as opposed to a cube. That may be the upgrade. The 2 other points. One is the money is still some of my favorite looking money in any game anywhere. So the money, all the ones are squares with a hole in it, which are kind of common. I still think it's cool looking cardboard. But then the 5s are like a crescent moon. I just love the crescent moon 5s and the cardboard ones. Why I haven't bought, real metal money for that. I think probably because I didn't upgrade the meeples either. So if I ever do that, I want the metal coins because they're still some of my favorite looking coins. And I played a lot of games with a lot of different coins. I usually do metal coins, even if it's not for that game. If the game has metal coins, I will use them. But I revere these coins so much that I wouldn't use my generic metal coins for this game. I'm only going to use the cardboard ones. The one negative thing I'll have, the box is neither functional nor practical, but very cool looking. And it's not going to translate in audio, but it's a longer box. And when the top's on, it's almost like you can see a map between the top and bottom, but it's not practical at all because like you can kind of see there's a top and there's a bottom, but it doesn't close all the way down the way. There's like a 1/4 inch where there's a space, and then even there's some elvish looking words or something there. But the cardboard for how much is in it is a little cheap. And that I've heard pretty much every review I've ever listened to have said the same thing. Yeah, it looks cool. So impractical because it's not a normal size box, and it's also a little flimsy on the sides. Don't let that affect your ability to buy the game or play the game. Speaking of buying the game, here's I don't want to say downside. The reality of this game, we've talked about everything that goes along with it. It is, even on a normal price, it's $50 right now on Amazon, $48.99. So it is one of the higher price games that we've definitely talked about, because we try to do practicality and try to do games there in the $20 to $30 to $40 range. This is $50 at pretty much everywhere I could find it.
Yeah. I think when you start talking about games that are going to take an hour or more, maybe it's a flaw. Maybe it's how I process. And I was just like, I was raised in a family that I very much remember my dad going to a casino for the first time and him being like, all right, Robbie, we're walking in with this much money and this is what's going to happen. And here's why, because we are we are not expecting to leave with this money. So we are saying at blank, as long as this entertains us for X amount of hours, that's what it's worth. And so I think about 4 people playing this for an hour. Suddenly you break that down and it's like, oh, it was only like $16, $17 for us to do that for the entertainment for the hour. And now we own this long term. When you start getting into these bigger games, I will always struggle to swallow the price of like a Gloomhaven or even a Scythe, right? That are these really big production games that you're spending $80 on, you're spending $100 on. And I understand, once again, it can add that value. I think at $50 for the amount of time that you can truly invest into this, absolutely worth it. My critique comes here for sure, because at $50, you're invested, and it may be $50 that you're like, we played it, we didn't really love it. Okay. That's tough. So if you have the opportunity, you have a local library that has copies of games, things like that, I would suggest trying it first. If you have a friend, things like that, any chance you would get to try it, if you like it, I think that $50 pays for itself, and it gets to the table quite often if you love that crunchiness. It's a game that I would struggle to purchase for our collection because I don't know that I could convince Lindsay to get it to the table as often. And for $50, I can go kickstart a new game. I can do that. So I understand where people hang it up. But if I did not have a developed collection, this could serve really well based on everything we suggested already on the podcast. I think it could sit in a place as the crown jewel, or when we're ready to dive in on a Saturday afternoon and hit something solid, let's hit Lords of Waterdeep. Like, I think it serves that role really well.
Yeah, I think it's a very good way to put it. And I don't think we've ever really foot stomped this, but what Robbie said is true. Just because we recommend it, it may not be perfect for you. So we're by no means saying go buy this right now. Very few games we say go buy this right now. If you're a hardcore trick taker, the crew is really easy. Like if you have that hardcore trick taking background, I can't imagine you not liking the crew. But every other game, you got to know who you are and what kind of games you like. And the more expensive it gets, it's it's easier to go, if you can go play it with somebody, to go play it. But like, for example, when we played with, it was last year that I showed it to Kimberly and Brad. They loved it and he bought it immediately, but they have Eli and Cohen old enough to play it. So he knew the 3 of them or the 4 of them would play it plenty of times. And they did play it for a while when they got it, and they played it often over last year. So it was an easy buy for them. And I'll tell you, Dakota, another friend, we've talked about Dakota more once because it was our game on Friday. I had to read you the text he sent me the other day. He said, what he said, already plan, or thanks for, had a great time. Already, thanks for having us. Already planning to get Lords of Waterdeep now. So he was an instant buy. Dakota comes from a D&D background. Dakota's definitely a heavier gamer, experienced gamer. So it makes sense for him. And with Marissa being someone who could hang with that level of experience, it makes sense that that's an instant buy for him. Speaking of feedback, man, I'll let you go first if you're good with that to give us your cookie rating.
Yeah. So I thought about this a lot because I don't have a ton of experience with the game.
Yeah.
And so I try to come in with open hands. On the disc golf side of things, I actually had a review of a disc drop today. And in that review, I was like, here's the deal. I'm never going to give like a full analysis on one day of throwing the disc because I may have had an off day. I may have been in a bad mood. I may have been feeling bad. And so I think in board games, it's the same way. Like I've really got to evaluate how was I feeling? Did I win the game? And therefore I'm really biased because it was like, or am I having a blood rage situation where I got curb stomped twice? And I actually think the game's pretty good, but I just don't enjoy it because I didn't win. I don't know. So where I landed on this is I think it's a chocolate chip for me. And here's why I put it as a chocolate chip. Because I think that anyone who truly gets into the hobby space, the lighter games are going to take you so far. I'm not going to say that you're never going to experience heavy games because my wife has been a gamer for approximately 5 years less than me because I started playing when I was in college, and we got married, obviously, after I graduated. And so when we were dating, I started introducing her to more games. But my wife is not the person who is like, hey, I want to go play the 2 hour. Like Lindsay will never play Dinosaur Island.
Yeah.
And I'm okay with that because it would be not fun for her. I think she would mentally drift mid game. This is a game that I think we could lock her into. Where I struggle is Champions of Midgard will, like, that is her. If she's going to play a worker placement type vibe, she tries to get champions to the table more often than anything. So it comes in as a chocolate chip because I think for people who are, if your significant other is enjoying games, but you're looking for something crunchier, this is going to scratch that itch so well. Like I said, if you're developing a collection, I think this sits on the heavier side of the game or the collection for you. And also you're not looking at I have so many games and therefore I struggle to get this one to the table. I look at the man sitting right in front of me digitally who has more games than I do. And he had people over and they got to play this game. You love the theming. You can jump in and play this game. Like there are so many hooks in the water to pull you into this. We had Jamie Stegmaier on 10 episodes ago. And when he was mentioning games, Lords of Waterdeep shows up representing as one of his favorite mechanics. It represents in there. So this is an evergreen game. I think that will hold for a long time. And so it falls in for me as a true chocolate chip.
Yep. That's good. I'm not surprised by that. And I acknowledge that it's everything you laid out there is so true. It's tough to give a pure rating, knowing that rating can change when you played it once, right? And so many of the games we've covered here, you played it once because we've been lucky enough to play it here, whereas I played most of those games more than once. Other than Smash Up, when I looked through our history of the games we talked about, there were some you've played more than me, but I played Small World a lot. You know, I played Dominion a lot, maybe not as much as you have, but I played Ticket to Ride. I played a lot. So those games, Sushi Go, I played those games enough that I have easily formulated my opinion on it. And so I know that's tougher. So I appreciate that, Robbie. I don't know if I hit it or if I gave it away, but there's no doubt this is a double doozy for me. It's such a great game. I say this way too often, but when I play, I'm like, why don't I play this more? It's because I have a bunch of games. But I said earlier in the episode, it's a game that the moment I'm done with it, I want to set it up and play it again to see how that outcome comes out for me, because I love it so much. And we highlighted the for hardcore gamers, it may seem too basic and too easy. I go there, I get a cube, I turn in, I get a quest, right? But I like the variety of those things. I like the pivot you have to do. I like you have to respond to what comes there and then seeing, they took that, so I may have to go do this instead. And the ease of gameplay. Like, it's quick, it's easy. We played an hour and a half, including the teach with 4 of us. I've said it all during this episode, but I truly love Lords of Waterdeep, and it's one that I can't imagine it'll ever leave my collection. I've given it to Christopher and Mandy. I gave a copy I had an extra copy I was just going to give away, and Hannah asked for it, so I gave it to Hannah and Will. So it's a game that I've given out multiple times because I love it so much, and it's one that we discovered. We did a beach trip a few years ago. It just hit me while we were talking about this. It's like, how did I find Lords of Waterdeep? We did a beach trip years ago, me, Elizabeth, Christopher, and Mandy. And they brought, this is when we were first getting into jumping back into heavier gamers. We've been gamers for a long time, but this is when we were starting to jump into the deep end, right? We had just moved back to Alabama, and we were down at the beach in Gulf Shores at my dad's condo, and they brought us a bag of games, essentially. And because they had friends who they borrowed games from. And they brought Lords of Waterdeep, and I was like, what is this thing? And I knew immediately, like, I love this so much. And I bought it. I think I bought it immediately as soon as I could as well, because I loved it that much. And it just doesn't hit the table enough. But it's absolutely a double doozy.
Yeah. There's going to be an episode where we come back and we look like we're going to pull all of our double doozies and be like, does it still stay? Does it not? And walking through the process. And I think I was ready to call it a double doozy. Like you could almost, if you watch my eyeballs for the video watchers on, like, when I was like, okay, did it jump it? Did it not? And so I completely agree, Jason. I think that it is a phenomenal game, and it accomplishes so many things. It teaches so many things really well. So here for it. And I gave Jason a bunch of pushback for a little bit, because I was like, Jason, you've done like 2 or 3 double doozies in a row, my brother. Like, we got to find a game that you dislike, and that's not why we went in the directions that we did. Yeah. But we got to find. But this is one that it very easily could have landed as another double doozy for us. So would be curious if you play Lords of Waterdeep. Let us know in the comments. How do you feel about it? Does it land in that category for you? And if not, why does it miss the double doozy rating for you? What would you rate it? I would love for the comment sections to kind of develop, if you've played the games, what is your cookie scale rating? What are you looking at? So, Jason, any final thoughts before we wrap it up?
A longer episode, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. When we have longer episodes, we get comments that people are always good with it because they like hearing us talk about the games. I know it took a long time to talk about the 2 games I played lately, but I mean, sometimes that's the point, right? So you guys, because those are 2 games we will never have as a Blood Rage could possibly be as an episode. We're going to go heavier. Dead by Daylight will never be a game on here. Blood Rage is unlikely because there's so many other heavier games I'd rather cover that aren't that are more accessible and people have more access to. So I go a little deeper on those as opposed to something we could go on eventually. Raccoon Tycoon, I've talked about as a game we played lately. You've talked about it, and we both agree. There's a really good chance it's going to be a featured game at some point. Wingspan or Wormspan, or maybe it's a double episode, right? That's really probably what we'll do is we'll talk about Wingspan and Wormspan in the same episode, and talk about what's good about both of those. So I appreciate you guys hanging out. Well, the good thing is I'm giving people, so send us somebody friended me on Instagram and asked me for some game recommendations. Okay, I'm going to ask you this, Robbie. I'm throwing you on the spot. I won't give his name out, but someone sent me a message and I'll respond to him. My wife and I meet a couple typically once a week to play board games. We're huge at Catan and want to find something kind of similar but a little more crunchy. Our budget is around $30 to $35. My initial answer to that's very similar to Catan is a game we've talked about, not Quedlinburg, but Machikoro. If you like dice rolling, but it becomes more crunchy because you're thinking more about what you're doing, then the easy answer is Machikoro, because it's very similar, rolling dice to get rewards, but then you're deciding which cards you want to buy and relying on those dice. And my backup to that is Quacks, if you find it on sale, because it's a different game, but it's light enough like that. Because I'm buying, there's an economy in which you're earning money, and then I'm buying more chips to put into more ingredients to put in my bag to pull that out. A little bit of push your luck. Anytime you have dice rolling, that's luck based. Pulling chips out of bags is luck based. So you like that. And the third one is another one we talked about is Cascadia, super light, tile laying, get to do things on there. I threw you on the spot. What's 1 or 2 you would do that maybe you probably agree with those 3, but is there other ones you'd like to add on to that?
Yeah. So I would add on, keeping the tile laying going. I think Carcassonne gets jumped so often.
Yes.
And if you like, if it's the big three, right? Ticket to Ride, Catan, and Carcassonne. What I love about Carcassonne is how I would sell Carcassonne is that you get the difficulty to me doesn't really rise much higher than Catan. So it's not like you're making some huge leap in terms of if you've got a gamer of these two couples that like is kind of getting pulled along. They're there for the FOMO. They're there because they love their spouse or their significant other, and they're like, hey, I will continue to do this game night for you. Right. Yeah. So I think that is there. But in terms of the luck of the dice roll, the luck of Carcassonne comes in that you're drawing tiles and you have no idea what's going to be on the other side. Cascadia actually, I feel like, eliminates a little bit of that luck factor because of the fact that you get choices every single time. And Carcassonne, I draw that tile and I'm playing it. Like there is no, this doesn't really help me finish what I wanted to do. So I have to now, I'm trying to build my huge city, but I keep drawing tiles. I drew a monastery. Okay. I drew another grass with one road in it. Okay. Like I have to now pivot along the way. So there's this adaptation, and then there are a lot of great expansions that come in with Carcassonne. So I would say Carcassonne definitely near the top. And then a game that, man, it's just on my brain, and I know that like it's so good. And I don't know budget wise, so it may be over the budget. But 5 Tribes, I just need more people to play 5 Tribes again. Like that is, it's such a wacky mechanic that I don't know a lot of people that when they play 5 Tribes don't have fun just scooping all of those characters and all those meeples and just booping their way around. So 5 Tribes will always be up there. But I would say Flamecraft is also pretty high on my list of games that I'm recommending a lot lately. Because of the combos and cute dragons and all that.
Unsurprisingly, we've covered a lot of these games, but it sounds like we're being self-serving, but we're not. We've covered these games for a reason, right? Most of the games, 2/3 of the games on our list are games that are under $40 for a reason, right? Because we want them to be accessible for your budget. We want them to be accessible for the gameplay. 5 Tribes we talked about more than once. Like, there's no doubt it'll be a featured game at some point. It's probably the game I forget about the most that I love the most, and because I love that, man. We're going really long, but I love having to, because I love the harder the game is, the more I love it, because like trying to figure out that game. Whereas you talk about an AP inducing game, freaking 5 Tribes will do that, and we'll talk about it whenever we talk about 5 Tribes. I'm gonna walk away for 10 minutes, and then you can take your turn because you're gonna look at every possible thing. Man, 5 Tribes for a game I forget more than anything that would easily make I could say that's a top 5 game for me because I love that game so much. Okay. 5 Tribes, you heard it here. We've talked about it many times. Eventually, it will definitely be a feature game because we both love it so much. Hey, thanks for this feedback. I will respond to him on Instagram. Any other questions you guys have, shoot them to us to Bards. You can follow. I'm Fantastic February Disc Golf. Robbie C Disc Golf. Right. I'm Fantastic February Disc Golf. Bards the board. Hit us up. BGA. Anything else? Let us know, man.
And we will see you guys next week and for our next episode with a special guest. So looking forward to it.
See ya.